Hi, I'm Fred Satilli. Welcome to the podcast. This is the podcast for the Voters Union of Accountability Nation, and we always talk about accountability on this show. And I had some ideas, but last night I watched the president at the Lincoln Memorial talking with some people. Now, the first thing I want to say about that is why were those people all sitting 10 feet apart? They've all been tested. They're all okay. If they weren't okay, they wouldn't be there. So why the weird show of distancing when it's totally not necessary? We have a lot of not necessary distancing in our country right now, and they demonstrated this. They should have come on and said, we've all been tested. We can all move in close to each other and act just the way we did before the Wuhan flu. But they didn't. They decided to be silly and stretch it all out, and it looked goofy, and it was goofy. And then, to make matters worse, the questions from the professionals were, in hindsight, do you think you could have done something better? That may not be specifically what somebody asked, but it's the style of question. You know, you ask a question, well, anybody in hindsight would have... Well, how about if the response was this? Well, Brett, you grew up and you went to school and somehow you got involved in media and you came here and you turned into a media hack asking the President of the United States meaningless questions. Now, wouldn't it have been better in hindsight if you'd done better in school, worked harder, become a research doctor, become a virus and community health expert, figured out some way to combat any flu because Brett, we have a flu every year and we want to combat it every year. We don't want people to suffer. You don't want people to suffer, do you, Brett? So in hindsight, wouldn't it have been better for you to have gone to school, researched this, come up with either therapies or a cure or whatever it may be so you could handle, you'd be the hero of the world. In hindsight, wouldn't that have been better? Wouldn't you love to hear him answer a question like that way? I know I could. I know I would like to hear that. And then the call-in people are equally bad, right? You got a nice guy calls in, he says, hey, you know, you've got all kind of programs to help big businesses and small business and people who get paychecks and people who paid their taxes and everything, but we have just a tiny mom and pop two-man business down here in Florida, and we're not getting any money. Now, bear in mind, the money that anybody is getting is not going to cure the problem. If you have a restaurant and you're doing a really dynamic business, you're never going to get back everything you lost. You're never going to be made whole. You're never going to be, sometime by Thanksgiving, you won't be financially and everything exactly where you would have been had this not happened. This is going to be damage done to you that's irretrievable for the rest of your life. You're going to have to take the hit and move on, just like what we do. It's a national thing. It's an international thing. It's a problem. Everybody's taking a hit, and you're going to take one too. It's not the government's job to make you whole and to give you some small amount of money, a few $100s. There are people that their expenses are tens of thousands of dollars. They rent these gigantic pieces of real estate and hire hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. They've got accountants, and they have people that aren't even part of the business who get paid, like the landscapers and the window washers and all those kind of people. So the idea that this government money, the small amount, when it's amortized across the entire country, is destroying the national economy, and it's really not helping any of the individual economies, right? So these people say, well, we've fallen through the cracks, and we want to know what you're going to do with people like us. Well, if your business is so small that it's just you and your wife, and you really don't have all these extraneous expenses or anything like that, really, and you're this age, you should literally be able to weather 6 months of having the business closed. But what I'd like the president to say is, oh yeah, you have a golf business in Florida and it's just the two of you. Well, I really like golf, and of course I haven't played in the past 2 or 3 months because I've been here night and day answering silly questions and listening to people who claim to be experts but don't have any answers. And so I think because I have a personal interest in golf, maybe I'll come down there myself, individually, by myself, to you, and if you take care of my clubs and maybe you hold my balls, we'll be able to work something out. Because that's probably the answer that he should give. And then there's the guy that calls up and says, and this guy's clever, he's not going to be bamboozled. He says, specifically, what are you going to do? I haven't received my unemployment check yet, and I want to know what you're going to do specifically to take care of me. And so what the president has to do in a case like that is say, well, there's a lot of people in your exact situation, and that's a big concern of mine. So we had the call screener take your name and address and everything, and what we found out is that back at the Internal Revenue Department, Department of Treasury, we have somebody at the Department of Treasury there who's aware of your case. Now, her name is Nancy. Now, she is working on your case right now. Now, I don't know, what state did you say? Okay, it's 3 o'clock. I can't tell offhand. She's going to have your project done by 3 o'clock tomorrow. And she's going to get it to her supervisor by 5 o'clock. Now, even though these people are working around the clock because they're heroes, the next person in the chain really won't address that problem in the morning. Now, as soon as he sees your name and your situation, well, he's going to run down there, have him cut a check, overnight it to me, I'll sign it, and then that will be Friday. Now, the problem is in your zip code, the post office there, the heroes in the post office are about 2 days behind, and you gotta be understanding about that because we're all in this together, right? And so even though they're going to have it overnight and receive that Monday morning, they're probably, I would say, 2 days, but you really got to be understanding about this. So now, your mailman, that's Walter, right? You've seen him, handsome black guy. He likes to have lunch between 1 and 1:30. And because your house is 2 blocks in from the main drag, he's probably not going to get to your house until, I would say, somewhere between 2:30 and 2:45. Now, obviously you're going to want to run out there on Wednesday and check that box because you have a real serious possibility of getting that money on that day. But if for some reason it just doesn't come through, they're just swamped, they might have extra people out, temporary people helping out that have done other jobs and are covering the slack, whatever, I guarantee without a doubt you'll have it Thursday by, let's say, latest 3:15. Does that help you? Does that answer your question? I tried to be as specific as I could. Now, that's what that guy wants, right? Now, there's another problem that we're having, and that is, once again, because this is Accountability Nation, the post office is struggling a little bit, and understandably so. So, I have an Amazon bookstore, and the reason I have an Amazon bookstore is because I've written 6 books, and I want to sell the books. Now, naturally, you would think you just go to a guy who has a bookstore and say, hey, buddy, I've got 6 books here. I'll give you a couple copies of each one. Put them in your bookstore. Throw it up on Amazon, eBay, whatever system you use. Maybe we could sell a few of these books. Well, the guy, when you talk to that guy, he says, oh, I see. You want to become a vendor in my business. Okay, we're going to have to create a vendor account. My attorney will draw up the papers. That'll be hopefully a month, 6 weeks, and then you'll want your attorney to look at it because you see, there are a lot of issues like the shelf space here in my store. I value that at approximately $3 a foot per each month. And so we're going to have to account for that. And then, of course, there's a liability. Somebody comes in the store, they're reading the book, they blow their nose into it, they close the book they put it back on the shelf. This comes to our attention. This is beyond our control. We can't be held responsible for that. So there's going to have to be a liability waiver. My point is, there's not just a regular guy who will work with you, I think, in most of America. So you go ahead, you open a bookstore. Now, you list your books, and somebody comes along and buys one of the books, right? And you immediately package it up really carefully and everything, and you take it down to the post office, and you mail it out, and the post office scans it, that they received it, and off it goes, and you think you can forget about it. You go home, and you contact the buyer, and you give him the tracking number at the post office so that he can see that you have mailed the book. Now, you would think that the story is over because it's now in the care of the post office and it is now their responsibility to deliver the book. But what happens is, a couple of weeks later, this guy hasn't received his book. So he calls you up and he says, "Hey man, I haven't received the book." And I say, "I know." And he goes, "What do you mean you know?" I said, "Well, I have the same tracking number you have. I see that it left here in California and it's gone off to, whatever state you live in, and they have it there, but they haven't given it to you yet." And he says, "Well, I want you to take care of this. I want you to address this thing." I said, it's beyond my control. Now, this beyond your control thing, this happens to the president every day. These callers, these media people, you know who they are, they want him to address things that are out of control. Why don't you have the answer to this question? When can you give us a date when we'll have the cure for this? Well, it's beyond his control. Why would you ask such a question? It's beyond weird. It's beyond rude. It's beyond impertinent. There's a kind of dependent ignorance that demonstrates that I find personally revolting. But anyway, the guy, he says, "Well, I'm not happy that I haven't received my book." And I said, "I don't blame you. Call the post office that has the book and see what they say." "Well, I'm not doing that. I want you to do that." "Well, I sold you the book for $10. I'm not launching an investigation. It's no longer my problem." Well, I find out that it is my problem because Amazon has decided that everything is on me. So it used to be you had a store, you went to the store, you gave the guy the money, he gave you the book, the transaction was over. There was no even need for a receipt. You have the book, he's got the money, the deal is over, and you go home, right? That's how we used to do it. You have a nice social thing, you browse around, you get out in the fresh air. It was a wonderful world. Now, we have this weird post-apocalyptic environment where one little guy somewhere trying to sell a book is responsible for Amazon and the post office. Now, the post office could take care of this guy because they got plenty of money, and Amazon certainly has plenty of money. And if the post office doesn't have plenty of money, it's just mismanagement, so there's no sympathy there. Amazon, on the other hand, is managed just fine, and they're making plenty of money. So they created the environment where the problem was. They made the store that had all these elements, the post office and the shipping and the handling and everything like this, and the weird payment system. You wait a week or two and money's put in a special account, and they even have it now. They're charging sales tax in some states, so it's all computed in. Very complicated. It's unnecessary for it to be that complicated, but they do it. Now, everybody knows that in the making of a podcast and in the making of a YouTube, you want to have a thumbs up and a comment, right? But this is the 6th episode that I've made of this, and what I'm finding is that it's too much for people to do the thumbs up. They just can't do it. I don't know why. It's you click on the little picture of a thumb, but you're not getting it. And then the other thing is the comments. Now, if I was to say in the podcast here, my friend Betty mailed a book out. She's got a store like mine, and she mailed it out, and the guy didn't receive it for 30 days. So that's an interesting thing about the post office. If I was to say that, people would email me and say, Fred, saw your podcast, loved it, really great, man. I don't understand this thing about Betty. Who is Betty? Why didn't you tell us more about Betty? How do you know Betty? I mean, all the issues in this podcast, and somebody would focus on that. It's the weirdest phenomenon ever, but it happens. So anyway, I'm learning a lot, going through a lot, but this is the Accountability Nation, and last week I talked about integrity and how integrity was taught to me in the Boy Scouts. And the Boy Scouts really, for training young men to enter life, it's their motto is be prepared. And what I'm finding out is that most of the adults in this country not only are not even good adults, are not even good Boy Scouts because they're all completely unprepared. They're not prepared to defend their home. They're not prepared. They don't have, look, I live in Southern California. The potential for an earthquake here to break up the 10 and break up the 101 and shut down the airport, we would be running out of food in 2 days here, and we would have food riots, serious food riots. We have 10 million people all packed around me who are going to want to eat. And this area here runs out of food in 2 days because not everybody has a whole bunch of food at home. So the people who live hand to mouth and who eat at restaurants and they take takeout and that kind of thing, not the people that cook their own food and have stuff at home. Those people who are dependent on the city for life, those people would get really hungry really fast and they'd be after you. So when we talk about accountability, the first person you have to account to, the first accountability comes to accounting for yourself as an adult, as a responsible adult. So you're going to want to have, how the issue was toilet paper is hilarious to me. I have 2 12-packs. I use a roll every 3 weeks. I don't, I'm going to say something kind of politically incorrect here. I found out talking to somebody very close to me, a lady who had no toilet paper, and I gave her 4 rolls of Charmin double extra rolls. I use about one of those every 3 weeks. I found out that she went through those rolls between 10 and 11 days. Now, I am not blaming women for deforestation, but I'm saying, if you're a lady, you should have a couple of 12-packs hanging around in case the day or time comes when you... Look, you could be in a car accident and not be able to get out of the house. You don't want to be short on toilet paper, so stock up. And it's the same thing with water. This LA, when the water is shut off here, the desert comes right back. It gets hot here, and if for any reason our pipes get broken through an earthquake or something, you don't have water, you're going to need a lot of water. So go to Costco, get a couple of cases of water, and stash it somewhere. You're going to need it. It's essential to life. Get a half a dozen boxes of cereals, a couple jars of peanut butter, get 10 pounds of pasta and 3 or 4 big jars of spaghetti sauce so you can make it. Get a gas grill with a gas tank and get a backup tank so you can cook and so you can heat water and so you can make a cup of coffee. Get some instant coffee. Get whatever you get, a week or 2 weeks worth supply of things that you need in an emergency. In amongst that is ammo. You're going to want to be able to protect your stuff because you might have to. So you get a nice 12 gauge and a box of shells. You're not going to need a lot. You're not going to shoot 100 shells. If you have to shoot one, as a warning shot maybe or something, but it's certainly better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, the old cliche. And get a small handgun, you don't need a bazooka, just, a little 9mm, and keep it on hand just in case. So honor yourself, prepare yourself. And I'm not even getting into finances because people are real touchy about money, but a lot of people in the news, you're hearing all this paycheck to paycheck talk and stuff like that. And for heaven's sakes, I know there are people that don't have what in quotes they call extra money, whatever extra money is, like as if it's in a shoebox in a closet somewhere and you don't need it. It's extra, right? Money is money and you need all you have. But for heaven's sakes, get a month or two ahead so that if you do, you could have a personal disaster. A couple of years ago, I was in a very bad motorcycle accident. I had to lay on the sofa for 2 months. And I had virtually no visitors during that time. I had one right in the beginning, somebody that really took care of me for a couple days. But you know, you got to go home. So I ended up having to limp around and, you know, wash myself and feed myself and all that kind of stuff. And I had the supplies to do that. I recovered real well because I was very low stress and I was very well prepared. And believe me, if in my weakened condition, if anybody decided to come in my house, you know, they would have lost that battle. So I want an accountability nation. I want the media to account for the horrible things they've done. I want the schools to account. I want, you know, politicians to account. But I'm just asking everybody to feel good about themselves and take pride in themselves and make yourself self-accountable, make yourself self-reliant. And whatever you do, don't depend on the government to take care of you in a crisis, because they don't care about you. They might put on some kind of show, but when the chips are down, your care and your safety is up to you. So thanks very much for listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, I appreciate that. And I just was a little bit put off by that ridiculous scene in the Lincoln Memorial last night, and I decided to talk about some of these inequities and some of the preparedness that needs to take place. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.